You are cleared for re-entry to Happy Times and Places, this positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast, in which I, Toby Hayhoe, watch a Doctor Who story, commentate along to it, and see if I can guess what my special guest's nominated favourite thing about each episode might be.
Hello Toby, it's Mark Wright here. I'm a writer. I write lots of things about Doctor Who. For 20 years I've been writing and producing various projects for Big Finish Productions. I write for Doctor Who magazine and the Doctor Who figurine collection, and I was a co-editor on Doctor Who The Complete History across 90 volumes, and with Cavan Scott I co-wrote the official Doctor Who miscellany Whoology to time with the 50th anniversary. The story that I have picked for you is The Ambassadors of Death.
Welcome to episode 3 of The Ambassadors of Death. Welcome to episode 3 of The Ambassadors of Death. Welcome to episode... You are not cleared for... Will you clear... I will clear you for re-entry. I mean, we're on the back of one of the greatest Doctor Who cliffhangers of all time, says I grandly, even though I'm not sure it's hugely celebrated. But it's the love that dare not speak its name. I know loads of people who glance across at each other in rooms full of Doctor Who fans, and they have that look that just says, "Are you a lover of episode 2 of The Ambassadors of Death's cliffhanger? So am I. Would you like to go into a dark corner and talk about it?" Now listen, sorry about that crass metaphor, but oh well, there we are. Listen, I am thoroughly enjoying this. Unfortunately, I'm going to be watching it on iPlayer, where the image chosen is a spoiler because it's the shot of the alien, which doesn't appear in this episode. So I think they've just grabbed them from random. But this picture was in the Doctor Who 20th anniversary special Radio Times, and I wasn't sure if it was a picture of a special effect, which I'm sure it must be. But does that mean it's a screen grab? And yet it's not, because those pictures were taken before the days of screen grab. So this is what I rather like about the aliens in Ambassadors of Death, is that they're a bit like the Ambassadors of Death itself. You're not quite sure if you're seeing what you're supposed to be seeing, or if what you're seeing is as a result of doctoring, and they're slightly vague. I sort of know what the aliens look like. They just look sort of like slightly blonde-haired men, but with sort of mushy radioactive faces, but you can't quite make them out. I can't quite work out what's a makeup job, what's a wig, what's a special effect, and especially as we've never seen them in sort of perfectly pin-sharp restored pictures, or if we have had pin-sharp pictures, they've been black and white. And so even the aliens themselves, who I'm talking about in an episode that you don't see their face in. So this is entirely appropriate as well. Everything is entirely appropriate to the Ambassadors of Death, including what happened to me last episode when I fidgeted a bit, and I'm experimenting with a new setup, and I think I moved the mic and it tweaked the cable and it sent loads of feedback. So there was lots of interference, which then caused wobble for the rest of the episode, which some kind... members of the Patreon pointed out to me, so I had to go and listen back and go, okay, so I'm gonna have to re-record probably 7 or 8 seconds, and I'll just have to do it, and try and mimic, because I can sort of hear what I was saying, but it's I can't get rid of the noise on it, so I'll just re-record those bits and feed them in, so it'll be a bit of a lie, but I've done noise reduction on the rest of the episode to get rid of the sort of the fuzz that was as a result of that interference that never quite went away. So it is a bit like it's the sort of audio equivalent of the rainbow strobing that was on the recolorized Ambassadors, that because of that signal that was rainbowy from the American NTSC copy. So I mean, the inability for Ambassadors to reach us in entirely perfect form continues even into this podcast. So I guess it's kind of appropriate. But because I am doing this at a time when I am having a break between episodes and putting them up on Patreon, and people are having a chance to respond. I think it's quite fun to hear from what people have had to say. So about last week's episode, Andrew Llewellyn says, I don't mind the vanishing tape bit. I've always put it down to a sleight of hand, and like a true magician, the Doctor adds a bit of bafflegab, in other words, talks bollocks, in order to add mystery to a simple trick. Yeah, but if it's sleight of hand, it's a massive tape. I mean, I can buy the coin in Kinder, because that's a sort of coin trick that you can do. You sequester it into the folds of your fingers and then turn it upside down, etc. That's a big tape, Andrew. I would say it's sleight of goalkeeper's hands. I suppose he does have frilly sleeves, but my goodness, the folds of those must be bigger on the inside. I've got quite a few comments, as I say, and lots of love, which is beautiful. David Gillespie Pratt, who's becoming quite the broadcaster, by the way. Go to the YouTube channel, and he's guest on other podcasts as well, where he's making a great account of himself. So do listen to David talking about Doctor Who, because it's always fascinating. I discovered Ambassadors when my school friend taped it off UK Gold, all black and white, and some episodes were in such bad quality it's shocking that they got shown at all. But I loved it then as the story no one paid attention to. Seeing the love for it grow in the last XX years has been wonderful. I agree, David. Yes, it was Keith Say who pointed out, was that Bernard brushing past the microphone? No, it was me adjusting things, and that's what caused all the noise. But hopefully, listeners who are listening to this in the future, you will have the restored episode 2, which may be a bit fuzzy round the edges, but will be generally better than the unrestored version, although I'm sure some of the people who listen to the original will prefer it that way. I preferred it when it had lots of scratchy. Such a great episode of Doctor Who. The cliffhanger is one of the best, right up there with Inferno episode 4, says Steve White. David Gillespie Pratt again. I was thinking about the influence of Apollo 13 on the story and coverage of a crisis in space, and went to look at the dates, and shockingly my memory was cheating me. Apollo 13 had its whole trip between episodes 4 and 5 of this story. Life imitating art, perhaps. Well, thanks for that, David. It wouldn't have occurred to me to go and check that. So Apollo 13 happened between episodes 4 and 5, which would have made this really, of the day. Mark Trevor Owen. I first watched Ambassadors of Death in black and white, Natch, in an apartment in New Jersey, USA. The local PBS station was having a pledge drive encouraging donations to their ad-free services. Every now and then, the story would be interrupted by a cut back to the studio where phones were being manned. Or we went from the Ambassadors of Death to the Ambassadors of Fundraising, as one especially cherishable presenter merrily shrieked. If anybody has a copy of that broadcast, I want it on the Season 7 box set. Everybody's wanting different versions of this in the Season 7 box set. I'm sure somebody somewhere will go, yeah, I want the knackered Happy Times and Places episode 2 on it as well. Guy Lambert. I loved that Bernard wants to be involved in a discussion about one of the most fascinating classic Doctor Who stories, because Bernard got involved in the post-credits sequence of episode 2. So if you've never hung around after all the nonsense in the credits and beyond to the post-credits sequence, you're missing out on a dog rubbing his head on a sofa. It's a shame it's so long, even though that's part of its brilliance, because I'd watch it more often. Yet that's also part of its brilliance, because I don't watch it often, so usually forget what's in most of it. This is Guy Lambert, did I say? Guy's a great correspondent and a nice fella. Hurrah for long-form Ambassadors. Where's the 17-part extended edition for Blu-ray? Chris Williams. If I remember rightly, Colin the Tape Guy. This is Colin from The Place, the comic shop in Wolverhampton, where I got my bootlegs from, and Chris did as well. But, Chris, I didn't get my Ambassadors from Colin. I'd moved on from Colin then, and I had a friend who lent me his tapes, basically, and I was able to get copies and do copies for free. If I remember rightly, Colin the Tape Guy, who I think we both got our Doctor Who's from, yes, that's right, charged a bit more for Ambassadors of Death. It was a rare colour edition. Could even have been £15. See, Colin normally charged, you gave him 2 blank videotapes, you got 1 back. It was a bit all over the place, a kind of ribbony kaleidoscope. That's a very good description. Yes, it's a sort of rainbowy strobe. So I first saw it in something that's between colour and black and white. Yes, that was the version that was available. As I say, I didn't have that. I didn't get it from Colin. I got it from my friend Andy, so I think I had episode 1 in colour and the rest in black and white. And then I got the Strobe version. And then I got the VHS version, and then I got, and so on and so on. So I've had it in many different forms, each slightly better than the next. Let's hope when they get round to season 7, they're able to do something more. But I don't know. I believe the raw materials aren't that great, but we will see. They've certainly improved those techniques, haven't they? But no, I didn't even raise it with Colin, Chris, because it was not a story I was particularly after, because nobody really liked it much, so it wasn't high on my list. Paul says, like you, Ambassadors was one of the very last stories I saw. I was under the impression it was a bit dull. Turns out far from it. It's actually now one of my favourites. The VHS was a bit odd though, wasn't it? Fading in and out of colour. Yeah, I'm not sure we'd do that now, would we? Steve O'Brien. Steve. Hi, Steve. I agree with you, Toby, that there's always been a bit of mystique about this story. I always love watching it, but I often forget it's there. It feels like an outlier story in an outlier season, and watching it weirdly makes me want to put on more Doomwatch, as it feels more a part of that show than the world of Claws of Axos and Terror of the Autons. Well, of course, this one shares its model work with Doomwatch, which I think was a nice use of BBC resources to go, well, we're doing a space story in Doomwatch, we're doing a space story in Doctor Who, let's share the budget in order to do better work for both. Philip Marsh, I'm a big fan of this story. It's the only Hulk story with a real sense of pace, probably reflecting the desperate speed with which it was written, matched with Michael Ferguson's brilliant direction. Interesting that you consider it a Hulk story. I mean, it is, but the credit says Whittaker. But yes, Hulk obviously did the rewrites on episodes 2 to 7. Philip Marsh, I'd actually put it in second behind Spearhead. Yes, even ahead of Inferno. An opinion Dante would obviously have consigned me to a lower level of hell for. But there you go. Well, I mean, Dante might have been happy with me because I'd have Inferno higher up than Spearhead. Indeed, I love Spearhead, but for me, I would probably have Spearhead bottom of season 7. And in fact, for many years, it was the only one that wasn't a 9 or a 10 out of 10. I'd have had it at about 8. I suspect, as I recalibrate as I get older, I'd probably let loose a bit and give them all 10s. But I still think Spearhead looks so gorgeous now that the film's so perfectly pin sharp that gives it an extra dimension as well. But I yeah, and of course I love the underdog. So of course, of course I'm not going to go the obvious route because I'm full of anyway. But yeah, no. But I genuinely think I prefer the 7-parters. But that's not to knock Spearhead, which I also love. So Dante might not consign me to any level of hell, but most other people will. David Green, how many beans make 5? 2 beans and a bean. A bean and half a bean. A bean and 2 beans and a bean and half a bean. I remember my mum teaching me this when I was a kid. It didn't really help with my GCSE maths mind. Nope, I still don't know what you're talking about, David. But there we go. We now know how many beans make 5. Lord Reith, in the form of David Green, has come in and told us how many beans make 5. Well, I know how many episodes make 3 because we've watched the first 2 and we're now about to hit the 3rd one. So, with that in mind, I would like you to press play on episode 3 of The Ambassadors of Death in 3, 2, 1. So, I mean, as has been pointed out, I thought in that, so I may have missed a couple of comments, in which case apologies, because somebody did point out that it's a great cliffhanger, but made of absolute nonsense, because why, if you were to try to pull the wool over the eyes of the unit team and space control, why would you record just the same message over and over again? Why wouldn't you activate at least a more sophisticated trap to say some other things or anything. But anyway, it's style over substance maybe, but it works. It's absolute joy. And I suppose, they're confused. They can't see anything. When you can't see what's going on inside you, you're not just going to immediately go, well, that's obviously a recording, are you? And I just think it's just done with such utter conviction. Look at the way that the camera's just moving in as it cuts on cuts to everybody, cutting in, moving in, cutting, moving in, cutting. It's absolutely, and then bang, bang, bang. Oh, absolutely gorgeous. The ambassadors of death. Yes. Thank you, David Whittaker, although I know that you're not having an awful lot to do with this anymore. Oh, the last story that David Whittaker is credited on, which is a terrible shame. I know many of you will have seen the documentary that we made for the Blu-ray range of Season 2, Looking for David. Something I'd resisted doing because I thought he was a well-known enough figure, but we actually found out quite a lot about him. Brilliant. I mean, again, I thought, oh, look at the way that John Pertwee leapt up onto the ladder there. You are indeed a man of action. He's a man of action in a frilly shirt. Now, I know that yes, that and that's a nice enough wheeze. That's a nice enough piece of mystery. That you have a tape recorder that's triggered by speech. Now, this is slightly mushy, isn't it? This episode, I spoke to Peter about it briefly. Peter Crocker, who's the guy that restores a lot of this stuff, and he had told me that, I'm trying to remember now. It was ages ago. He told me that one of the film prints was actually, the black and white film prints was actually fuzzy and out of focus, so you can't get a particularly brilliant lock on. And this certainly looks a bit more. The color doesn't look quite so consistent either, does it? So I think this is definitely an episode that looks like it definitely looks like it's been restored. Everyone looks a bit like a ghost. Not to say it's completely washed out, because some of the colours are quite bright, but it's it certainly doesn't look like colour should look, even though obviously it's better than the black and white, because it's not a black and white story. But and some of the darks are very dark there. This is Heldorf, played by Gordon Stern, who is a Canadian actor, and one of my great, I had the great pleasure of interviewing Gordon, and I went to his house. I wrote to him, and he called me up, and I went to him. I'd just done a voiceover actually, and I went to his place, and he was like, "What was the voiceover for?" And I went, "Oh, some car or something." He went, "Yeah, who gives a shit?" And he'd just been to the and so I'd had to delay it by an hour or something, but he was cool about it, and it was really interesting though, because he was in his 90s at this point, and he was quite a sort of blunt Canadian, and it was interesting to go to the house of an older man, because I could see he'd just had his lunch or something, and I love the way that Carrington, John Abineri, says, "I'm not asking you," and Gordon Stern was very good at accents, and so he's playing a foreign, he's playing a non-Canadian character there, to give Heldorf a bit of to give the character. We have characters in the story from loads of different places, which gives it an international feel. And one of the things I remember about going to Gordon Stern's is that his lunch had was just a big bone of something, and obviously he'd not cooked meat and two veg or a bolognese or a moussaka or something like that. He just had a bone and some meat, and he'd been to the gym at 94. He was still working, but at that time, it was one of my earliest twos rounds, and I thought, well, I've got to keep them to 20 or 30 minutes. So I don't want to take too much of people's time. So I stopped the interview at 25 minutes or whatever, and then stayed for an hour and a half talking to him about all sorts of other stuff. But I'd stopped recording, and that taught me, well, look, people are happy once I'm there. People are generally happy for me to be there, and I'll get the hint when to leave, but don't leave too early. And Gordon is no longer with us, and represented, he'd worked with all sorts of people, I think he knew Rod Steiger, and he'd just been in The Tudors, which he told me about, which he'd I think got one episode of because he was a Canadian actor and it was a Canadian co-production, but he got talking to one of the producers when they were by an organ and they got talking about some classical music or something, and the producer kind of liked the cut of his jib, so he got 3 or 4 more episodes, even doing that in his sort of late 80s, and that's how sort of television works. So Gordon was a really fascinating guy, and I really liked him. And it taught me a lesson to not press stop, because he told me loads of fascinating stuff, much of which I now can't remember. And he was Anyway, he's only in this episode of Doctor Who. He's David's dad in the dream sequence of American Werewolf in London. He had a really interesting career. Pops up in all sorts. So this is where the plot, I think, starts to get rather interesting, where General Carrington, who we've seen with the astronauts, is now coming in and trying to placate the Doctor, but the Doctor sees through it all. And I love the fact that everybody here has had to be very, very polite and very formal. And General Carrington is a really interesting character. I've said interesting twice. Interesting box, Toby. But he seemed like he was a baddie. But now we think, is he on the side of the goodies? But the goodies have been behaving in a misguided way. Oh, but now then, who's this? Because we've seen Carrington with these guys, so these guys must that these new interlopers. That's Gordon Stothard, the tallest of them, who is Grun. And he's a Cyberman in the Wheel in Space. He's a warehouseman in the Invasion, but you can spot him. So this is quite a horrible death, and I think that's Dinny Powell, isn't it? Or Nosha Powell, one of the Powells has just shot Gordon Stern at point blank range. That was Roy Scammell as the other one getting killed, and here's the next tier of villain, which is William Dysart, who has been in The Highlanders, playing Alexander. He's killed in episode 1, but he makes a bit more of an impact here. He's also... We had the Silver Jubilee edition of the Radio Times, and that would... I'd occasionally turn up in the house when I was scanning bookshelves, and I remember, reading the cast list of that, and I was delighted to see that... Survivors, I think it was the penultimate episode of Survivors, starred John Abernethy, and then top of the guest cast was William Dysart. So the latter half of Survivors is a bit of an ambassadors reunion. This shot of General Carrington and Liz, the Doctor, and the Brigadier in the car, that was the photo that accompanied the episode guide in Doctor Who magazine, in that rare copy of Doctor Who magazine I had kicking about the house that gave me the episode endings for ambassadors. That's one of those things that you need from old telly, is to sort of make a meal of entering. So Carrington gives the Brigadier a look and he lets him in, which just helps to bridge us between outside and inside, and has given Regan's heavies, Gordon Stothard and whichever Powell it was, I'm pretty sure it's Dinny Powell, at time to exit. They've clearly escaped via the tradesman's entrance, because the Doctor arrived, the Doctor and the Brigadier and co arrived pretty quickly, hot on the heels of Regan and his heavies, his other set of heavies, who were also, it's funny that the two heavies outside, one of whom was sort of tall and rather thin, and one of whom was sort of smaller and had a moustache, were rather similar to the two heavies inside. So maybe he had to have, if you're applying to be my heavies, one of you has to be tall and sunken cheeked, and the other one has to be rounder and have a moustache. That's how I want my heavies to look. But anyway, we never see the two who just killed off Roy Scammell and Gordon Stern again, and the two that got in the van. I mean, this is our introduction to Regan. He's basically, taken these 3 astronauts off Heldorf and Roy Scammell and left 2 guys there to shoot them at point blank range, and then his 2 mates, who he's got to come with him, his 2 helpers, who presumably is sort of hired to give him a hand. So he's obviously hired them at, Gangsters Are Us or whatever. But he's known from the moment he's hired them that, he does, once he's finished with them. I mean, it does beg the question what they've actually done as part of the mission, because they were waiting outside, so there were no use helping to kidnap the ambassadors. That they've literally stood outside, I suppose they've stood guard outside for 5 minutes. And then he's gone, okay, that's all I needed you to do. You get in the back with them, and knowing full well that it's going to kill them. So it seems an unnecessarily harsh sort of way of conducting business. But what it does do is it gives way to this brilliant sequence, which, again, doesn't advance the plot at all, but it's got a chance for Michael Ferguson to get some of these beautiful shots of this cranes and the grabs and everything in the quarry, and to do that thing of Regan covering his tracks and he's doing the work himself by going up the pile of gravel and treading it down onto the corpses of his helpers. It's pretty grim, isn't it? But then Ambassadors does a silly thing, having done something harsh and cool. That's all right. I can understand that. He's just flipped the thing. But I don't know how that works, because clearly the way it really works is that they repaint the van, but it's not a van that has sort of Venetian blind sides, so that can only have been achieved the way that they show that with a video effect, unless it's trying to suggest that the van has revolving walls, but I'm not sure that it is. But anyway, what it does mean is that Margot Hayhoe and Pauline Silcock, both members of the production team, get their name check in the story, because Hayhoe Laundries and Silcock Bakeries, I have those on an orange t-shirt that I got from Redbubble. Is it Andrew Mark Thompson's? I think there's a handful of creators I get those from. It might have been Clayton Hickman's. Yes, it means you have a nice nod for members of the production team, Margot Hayhoe and Pauline Silcock. I know Margot now. She's great. She's always very, very helpful when it comes to tracking people down from behind or in front of the cameras. And nothing's ever too much trouble for Margot. She gave me a list of people for Who's Round who she suggested I get in touch with, letting me know where they were, putting in a word. She's one of the heroes of us being able to track down people from the past of Doctor Who. But a lovely piece of music. John Pertwee's brilliant in this, isn't he? He's one step ahead of everybody. I mean, once he has the requisite knowledge, he's given small bits of knowledge, but they enable him to make the guesses that keep the heroes going in the right direction, which means that the baddies keep having to improvise. Although it's clearly always their plan to as it will turn out, people are betraying different people, because Carrington has a different plan to Quinlan, Regan has a different plan to Carrington, and I rather like all that, because all of their motives are very clear, but only become clear as the story progresses or even concludes. But I sometimes hate baddies double-crossing baddies, especially when in something like 24 they get a new baddie in and get a bit bored of their old one, so get the new baddie who's an ally of the old one to kill the old one, because basically, well, you've done a few episodes. Whereas this, I think all the double-crossing makes a kind of sense, different people are working for what they think are the right reasons, and the only one who's sort of truly amoral is Regan, and yet he's kind of likable and charming. Yes, I'm playing a minister, and you play a minister by talking in a certain way. Yes, of course you do. But because I'm doing this accent, it's slightly limiting the variation of my tone. But there we go. You tell him, Ralph Cornish. He's a great character, and whereas actually Ronald Allen was often accused of being quite wooden, but I don't think he is. I think he's he has an undemonstrative professionalism about him, and Cornish is a character who sort of tells it like it is, but without breaking his composure. I love these shots of the ambassadors sort of in the radiation room. And I love that, the sort of hands against the screen, and because these aliens are a bit like the story itself, they're kind of difficult to get an angle on. They don't really speak. I know they get a few lines a bit later, but they're a sort of silent, difficult to discern. What they are, what they want. We know that they're not the astronauts because the doctor's just said, so what are they? They're obviously stricken, and yet they're also lethal. And how have I got this far without mentioning the mighty, the exceedingly good Cyril Shaps, here having been in the Tomb of the Cybermen as Viner, who's really annoying. He's also in Quatermass 2, episode 6. Got a lot of work with Rudolph Cartier. Often, actually, I read a newspaper interview with him from the sort of late 50s, early 60s, where he talks about the fact that he played a lot of villains because he would have what we would call, in inverted commas, foreign looks, if need be, in a lot of sort of 50s and 60s costume dramas. That's great. Again, the way that it doesn't just push Regan over, it sort of flings him, and he flies because he's such a physical actor, William Dysart. He does a real sort of fling through the air. Now, of course, there is a slight confusion there because I thought their touch was supposed to kill. Now, we know the radiation is low, so maybe because they've been feeding on not enough radiation, they're not radioactive enough to kill. But I suppose if you wanted to be critical, you would say if their touch is lethal to us and Regan is only wearing gloves, why hasn't he just been killed? But I'm prepared to say that's because the radiation is low. There's I hadn't noticed this before, but when Regan hit that pillar in the corner of the radiation room, it seemed to move a little bit, and then when he was against the wall there at the top of the stairs, there was a bit of, I would say, the wall undulated a little bit. I'm not a fan of invoking wobbly sets, but both of those spoke to me, shall we say. I discerned them in a way I might not have done before. See, restoration's not all it's cracked up to be. Because you could say if things were a little bit less clear, I probably wouldn't have noticed those on... I'd have probably noticed... I certainly wouldn't have noticed those in the recolored from American, because the picture was so fuzzy. So radiation's a very sort of 1970s thing, isn't it? We used to, because of, there was, all the stuff, post-60s stuff about the bomb and all of that. We don't. I said, well, and I suppose then there was, even in the 80s, there was Chernobyl and everything, wasn't there? But it was certainly a thing that seemed to pop up in drama a lot back in the day, and seems to less now. I like Sir James Quinton. Yeah, I like the way that we're. Could you prove it? No. I like all that sort of exchange. That there's something going on at top level that's helping to hinder the Doctor's plans to solve all of these mysteries. I love Regan's sort of enclave where he's got the two telephones. He's got the the Carrington line and the Heavies Are Us line. And I like that exchange he had before with Lennox, where Lennox sort of went, "Do you think you'll get your money if you don't, if they die?" So even though Lennox is working for him, they've kind of established that there's a bit of antagonism between them, and even though Lennox is a bit weak, and obviously, slightly forlorn, slightly broken, there's something rather sad about Lennox, and Shaps gives him a sort of broken dignity, but he still is able to, issue the odd issue the odd shot across Regan's bows, if you like. The colours changed again, so I don't know if that's to do with the signal or the film print. I'm sure there will be at some point, or there already is a blow-by-blow account of which bits are restored from what and why some bits are better than others. But it's certainly not a consistent picture. So here we have Liz Shaw, played by Caroline John, who can't drive at this point. So when she's driving the car, it's Roy Scammell in a wig. And she's also pregnant, so she can't do any stunts. So as we will see, there's double the need for... Well, I mean, she wouldn't have done some of these stunts anyway. I love the urgent score. And I love the fact that they don't have to... There's none of that, what do you mean, Doctor? As soon as there's a kind of... Brigadier, there's an issue. He's like, right, I'm off. There's none of this... Are you sure, Doctor? I think stories that want to mess around a bit more might have added 2 or 3 lines to that in order to slow down the Brigadier's exit. But as soon as it's like, what? He's like, right, I'm out of here. And it just means the thing continues to be sort of tense and nervous. That's quite nice cutting between the stunt double and the close up of I don't know how that hat is staying on Roy Scannell's head. I think he must have had it safety pinned to the wig that must be safety pinned to his head. But anyway, this is again where the fact that the film is quite fuzzy helps with the fact that that is not Liz Shaw driving the car, except in close up. But that's very successfully done. This is an effective sequence. Isn't Bessie a wonderful thing? That's really an effective sequence. Again, it's not just that Michael Ferguson's a good director of action. It's that he's managed to overcome that there are some issues with this in terms of availability of resources. Notably, that his leading actress can't drive and can't do too much charging about either because she's pregnant. Though I think this is her, isn't it? You can see. Yeah, I think that's her in the rugby field. Derek Martin, Charlie Slater from EastEnders, chasing Liz Shaw across a weir. So here we go. This is sort of handheld film camera. It's a shame that the film is out of phase, although I suppose that does add to the sort of giddiness of the sequence. But out of phase film is always a shame because it's not how it would have been. I don't think it's how it would have been. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it's an artifact as a result of making the recording rather than what we would have seen originally on the broadcast. I'm going to stick that. Yes, I think so. I'm sure. I bet after listening to this, Peter, it's gonna send me lots and lots of feedback. Going, actually, this, that, or the other. Now there we go. Now Dallas Cavell has been demoted and is now sharing a title card with Heldorf, played by Gordon Stern, whilst all of the others have. It's anomalous. Listen, if you care, listen to my podcast about credits, where I go through what happens with the Ambassadors of Death credits, because, as I say, largely the guest actors are credited in order of appearance. The main guest actors and then the supporting guest actors are done thereafter. But occasionally, it doesn't always work for Cyril Shaps. He when he appears first in an episode, he doesn't get first guest billing, and there, as I say, Dallas Cavell does not get included in those single captions there in order of appearance, and yet there's an episode where he's dead at the beginning of, where he gets top billing because he's the first person to appear. So it's not entirely consistent, but you can sort of see what the pattern is if you're inclined to look for it, which I suspect is me and nobody else. But anyway, what is my favourite thing about The Ambassadors of Death, episode 3? Because I've got to choose because Mark Wright and I are actually equal at the moment. And he chose my favourite thing for episode 1 as part of his thing for episode 2, even though he also chose the same thing as me for episode 2. So there's no chance of him choosing my thing for episode 1. So I'm not in a bad place, although, let's be fair, I'm unlikely in the course of 7 episodes to guess the majority of the same things. I suppose it means there are fewer things for us to choose, but nonetheless, I still don't really rate my chances. One other thing I remember, I may as well share because I share everything, don't I? One thing that I remember slightly irking me in the commentary was when I think Heldorf is there and gets killed, and then, and I've done a pretty good job on these commentaries to say to the co-commentators, that's so-and-so, that's this, that's that. Who's that, Toby? That's this. Where was this? That's this. And then when Roy Scammell gets shot in the thing, I went, oh, and that's Roy Scammell. And John just went, no, it wasn't. And it was like, well, I mean, this is the first time you've watched this in ages, and thanks very much. But yes, it is. But you don't. You just let it go because you take a back seat, and I'm only there to, prompt them and help them. And I thought I was being helpful by going, look, there's Roy. And instead of going, oh, yes, or to sort of just flatly contradict me, I was like, oh, okay, thanks very much. And just left it. But I think Mark Ayres cut that out, because you can take the odd line out here and there. They don't really edit them because they're done in real time. So if you take something out, there's a silence. It's very difficult to make it flow. But I think there, and I remember thinking, oh, I wish they'd cut that out, because it's a bit awkward, and I'm not wild about that moment, and come on. But I think Mark did. So thanks, Mark. And Caroline John wasn't meaning any harm, and I think she probably almost even said it without thinking, but I took it first very personally. I would take it less personally now, and just because I know that it, and also when you're doing a commentary, it's very much a stream of consciousness thing, and you might say something, and I say things on this, then immediately regret what I've said, or immediately correct myself, or whatever. And I don't know. I just think it was almost a reaction of hers to go, "Is it? No." She wasn't. She wasn't going, "You don't know what you're talking about," or anything like that. It was just. I think it was just the word no. But my God, it resonates, doesn't it? Look, even after all these years, get over yourself, Toby. I am over myself. I raise it in order to say that's a thing that wouldn't bother me now. But then I did. I bristled, not out of anger, but out of, I took it as a slight. And it wasn't about me. Get over yourself. There we go. I share stuff like that, even if it doesn't put me in a good light, because it's an effort to go. It's an effort to say we learn. We have to be honest with ourselves about reactions that we might have to something that, in the cold light of day, are not good reactions, and we must fess up, even if only to ourselves. Instead, I do it to listeners of this podcast. But there we go. That was the thing. But I suppose I could say, well, I'm using it to illustrate that occasionally, if there's a little bit of a dead end or a bit, it might be actually that you go back and listen to it and it's still there, and I've just erased it from my memory. I tend not to listen to Doctor Who commentaries that I'm on for obvious reasons. They make me feel physically sick. They might have the same effect on you as well, in which case, clearly you've got something you need to bring up this morning, and you've put me on so to do it. But if you haven't vomited yet, should we leave the vomit? Yes. Right. What is my favourite thing about episode 3? Now, I love that Gordon Stern was in it. What an interesting fellow he was. And he's only in a couple of scenes, but he's really good. Heldorf is quite a good character. And isn't that amazing? I almost didn't write to him because I thought, well, there are other people who worked on Ambassadors of Death, not least Michael Ferguson and Margot Hayhoe. But I knew he'd written back or sent a signed picture to a friend of mine, so I thought, well, he might be up for it, and he's probably had an interesting career. Again, is one I'd have done better research on the other aspects of his career and spoken to longer if it hadn't been such an early Who's round. I kicked myself for that missed opportunity. So I mention him here to acknowledge him and say I had a lovely a lovely couple of hours in his company, and I wish I'd recorded those because Gordon is no longer with us. But he was a blunt, slightly sort of pesky, but he watched the episode. He went, "Yeah, I was good. He was good. Yeah, it was good," which I really liked. Because I brought it with me, and we had a watch of it. He liked Nicholas Courtney. But yeah, I liked Gordon, and he was, nothing like the character that he played. And he was still going to the gym at 90 and eating a big leg of meat. and as I say, when I said I'd been doing a voiceover, and he would say, "Yeah, who gives a shit? It's work, Good for him. He lived near the Finborough Theatre. But I suppose you can only know what you know and learn from experience. And I learnt from that, and from a couple of other occasions, to keep recording. But actually, I had one where actually one of the interviewees had said, "Oh, are we going to be much longer?" Because I promised them I'd only be 20 minutes, half an hour, and I got to 25 minutes, and they were like, "That's what we promised you." So, it didn't come out of nowhere. But I will still regret it forever. And I didn't get photos of me with a lot of these people either. I got photos of them, but not of me with them. Again, I suppose it would just be something that I could look at, but then I'd look at it and go, I don't like my smile, I don't like my shirt, I don't like my hair. Bleh. So even though I regret not having photos of me with these people, I'd regret something about those photos. So, oh God, life's a minefield, isn't it? God, I'm awful. I regret everything. I sometimes need to enunciate all of those regrets as a form of entertainment about a really good episode of Doctor Who. This is why I watch Doctor Who, you see. It's because, largely, I mean, it doesn't seem to in this post-episode 3 navel gaze, but when I'm watching Doctor Who, you see, it stops all those voices that are self-critical or that are regretful or that, need me to lead me to mull over things and worry about things. When I lose myself in Doctor Who, those voices shut up for a bit, which is really good. So I shouldn't let them speak now. They're coming now. See, they come in at my ears, and sometimes they come out of my mouth. What is my So look, Gordon. I won't vote for Gordon Stone, because even though he was lovely, there's not an awful lot you can do with Heldorf. He's not one of the great or one episode Doctor Who characters. Although Gordon Stone does a good job with a couple of scenes that he gets. I like the way John Abernethy says, "I am not asking." I love. Well, you see, is this where I'm going to have to choose somebody from the cast? But I love, because you see, I could choose Ronald Allen and I could choose John Abernethy. Not from this episode, but I could choose William Dysart from this episode, couldn't I? Because this is the start of Regan, and Regan is ace. And the first thing he does is kind of goes, you follow on, what is it, by the Directorate, once you've finished here, i.e. kill these two people, and then he comes outside and he goes, "You two get in the van with those guys, you'll be fine," and then buries their corpses under gravel, and then he's quite mean to Cyril Shaps, and he gets flung about by the astronaut. I actually love the 3 astronauts. I think the image of them lying on the beds through the glass, I think that's really good. The fact that one of them holding his hands on the glass and collapsing, they're sort of weird, they're unknowable, they're slightly vulnerable, yet they're slightly creepy as well. And it's just 3 actors in astronaut suits. So that's, again, that's Doctor Who at its best, taking a very simple thing, kid in a gas mask cracking a wall, statue, plastic daffodil, men in astronaut suits, and making them a thing of terror, of menace. But on top of the terror and menace, it's the sort of unknowability as well. And that's another thing I could choose, is the slightly shadowy nature of the Ambassadors of Death, for all the reasons that I, and indeed some of the correspondents at the top of the episode, have talked about, because of the and I suppose because this episode is one that looked very different throughout in terms of the colour, the saturation, the contrast, and everything. I wonder if I could choose the fact that it's actually a little, unreachable, unknowable, as unknowable, not and that's not just because of the state that it's in, because of its reputation, because of because of, but also because it's the way that the story is told is unusual. It doesn't play by the normal rules of Doctor Who. It is slightly opaque, the Ambassadors of Death. It's an opaque and strange thing. Now, that sounds to me like it should be perhaps the overall thing, and I also am not sure it's a thing that Mark will choose. So am I to take this seriously and just go, well, no, it's the bit of the gravel pit, isn't it? That's just brilliant. The episode doesn't need it, but it's well cool. Or even I like the fact that Pauline Silcock and Margot Hayhoe get a mention on the side of the van, even though I don't like that effect because it doesn't seem practical to me. It's a video, it's a film effect. So I don't understand what's supposed to happen in the car. That to me goes along with the transmigration of object and the force field as a bit that I'm just kind of I would iron those out in order to make this 100% showable to members of the general public, which will never happen. Do you know what I mean? But Regan does introduce it. But I also like what's happening with Carrington, that, we have Carrington there with the astronaut. So he's obviously working against the Doctor and co. But prior to us seeing him, he was in civis, although very smart civis with a buttonhole. But now we see he's a member of the army. And he's got these scientists, Heldorf and Roy Scammell. So he's with them. But he's come to tell the Doctor, what's going on with this new kind of radiation and blah-de-blah. And that seems to placate everyone, except the Doctor, because the Doctor's no fool. But then they've been kidnapped by Regan, and we don't know that Regan is working with Carrington. So now we're going, okay, so Carrington's one of us, but the government haven't been exactly helpful. So now we've got all sorts of people pulling in different directions. And we don't have the relationships clear yet, and who's working with whom and for whom and against whom. So the conspiracy theory stuff I really like as well. And I really like Carrington's role in this episode in particular, where he says to Heldorf, I'm not asking you, and then he does that very, very polite sort of meeting that he has with the Doctor. And the Doctor goes, I'm not having any of this. And then he has to go, oh, well, no, all right, you can come with me. But he's presenting himself as a good guy. And actually, I love Pertwee in this episode because he's cutting through the bureaucratic bull and doing so. I love the way the Doctor's one step ahead of everybody in this story, but purely on the basis of how he digests the clues that he's been given. So all of that stuff is absolutely brilliant. Plus, it's got that great theme where the music kicks in dramatically every time it needs to, and then you've got the atmospheric music, the dum dum dum, and the blue. I think Dudley Simpson's score is excellent and really moody and really helps sell the tension when it needs to be tense, because it's a very tense story. But then the action when it needs to be dramatic, and it's a very action-packed story. But also the plot drama as well, not just the stunt work, but also the dramatic revelations or the dramatic moments, which the script gives us plenty of as well. Excellent work from Dudley Simpson. But what am I going to choose? Regan keeps screaming to me, even though he has better bits in later episodes. There's a brilliant bit where he says, make a list, and there's his brilliant bit at the end in episode 7, which I love, which we'll talk about when it happens, I'm sure. So is it too early to mention Regan? Because he's got some great stuff coming up. But this is... so what do I choose? I mean, the scene on the pier is great, all that giddy handheld camera and the fact that it's another stunt. But the bit in the gravel pit is great too, isn't it? Because it doesn't need to be there, but it just underlines what a swine very charismatic one. I even like the way that he looks at the van to check there's nothing coming before he changes Hayhoe Laundries into Silcock Bakeries. There's just something, he's no nonsense about the way that he does stuff. He's got a sort of casual capability about him. Oh, what's Mark Wright going to choose? I'm going to choose the conspiracy stuff. It is a great... The fact that it's an opaque story. Or Regan. I'm agonising over this, and he'll choose nothing. He'll choose the ambassador's boots or something. Regan. I'm going to choose Regan, played by William Dysart. Another tier of villainy to a story that's already had loads of villains in it, or some villains who then might not seem to be villains, or are they? We don't know. But here's somebody we've really got an angle on. He's a nasty piece of work, but he's quite charming as well. It's a great performance. He's an immediate presence, and he'll go on to do some more wonderful, wonderful things. And I suppose if Mark chooses him in a later episode, I will at least get a point for that. Do I? Yeah, I think so. I think that's how it works. The rules are quite opaque.
And now we come to episode 3. And I think my favourite thing about this is one of those things that marks this out as steering into very James Bond territory, is the moment where Lennox, in his very multi-purpose van, which is used for everything, carrying bodies and Martian invaders, the ambassadors, it's the moment where he changes the signs. It's pure Goldfinger, but with a Doctor Who twist. He pulls that lever, and the sign on the side of the van changes. The registration going round. I mean, that's pure Goldfinger. That is pure Bond. But there's a radiophonic sound effect added to it, as only Doctor Who could do. It takes something from Bond and makes it very Doctor Who. But I just love that the sign changing, and I love the little tip of the hat to Margot Hayhoe, who worked on this story, and the Hayhoe Laundries, of which I assume that was meant in tribute to Margot, who is so lovely, and it's always great to have Margot at Doctor Who conventions and talk. We've talked a few times over the years, but yes, it's that moment that takes it into pure Bond territory that I really love.
Well, after all that agonising, I definitely don't get a point there because he chose the one moment I said I didn't particularly like. Ha 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 ha! And he meant Regan, not Lennox, of course, but that's okay. And yes, Mark, to answer your question, is definitely a nod to Margot Hayhoe, and it's also a nod to Pauline Silcock, because Margot was the assistant floor manager, and Pauline Silcock was one of the director's assistants, but couldn't do the whole thing, I don't think, or certainly had to be taken off for a bit because she got pretty much hit by a motorcycle from the sequence in episode 2. But I presume her name on the bakery, Port Silcock's Bakeries, was decided before that. It wasn't like, you've been nearly killed by a motorcycle, we'll name a bakery after you, especially as Margot also gets the laundry. So that was probably planned well before that, because it would be scant recompense, I think, for a near-death experience, or certainly a workplace injury to go, it's all right, we'll paint your name on the side of a van. But how fun that the bit I didn't particularly like, or that sits uneasily with me because I can't quite see how it works, is absolutely what Mark loves. And I love the way he describes that of, the Doctor Who doing the Bond thing by putting a radiophonic workshop sort of sound effect twist on it. And I love the fact that something that I can't sit well with is the absolute favourite bit of somebody else. And maybe that means next time I see it, I'll think of Mark and the fact that it appeals to him so much. And I'll get over myself with it and enjoy it for what it is, not for what it isn't. And that's part of what this process is all about. This process really should be about me winning and scoring points and be the best. But I resigned myself to long ago that I will never be the best at anything. But I have a bash. But that I think that's a perfectly good outcome. That if I can't choose the favourite thing, that actually, if the person's favourite thing is my least favourite thing, it will make me learn to stop worrying and love the bun or Silcock's Bakeries. I quite amused myself then. So thanks to Mark. Thanks to episode 3 of The Ambassadors of Death. And let's see how we get on with episode 4. But for now, I'm going to go and wash my clothes and then bake a cake. So I'll need the help of Hayhoe Laundries and Silcock Bakeries, but you can't do the two things at the same time because one has to be replaced by the other. Happy times and places to you all. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hayhoe, and my special guest, Mark Wright, who, since last episode, has left Twitter. But I can't see which social media platform he announced that on, but I definitely saw it and he's definitely not there anymore. So something that happened in an earlier episode has been contradicted in a later episode. How very Ambassadors of Death. I'll try to find out where you can find Mark, but in the meantime, he has my gratitude, as do the patrons who make this podcast possible, and they include Sabrina Tirabassi, Apollo C. Vermouth, Gary Wales, Adam Westwood, Stephen White, Tom White, Michael Williams, Rhys Williams, Andrew Willis, Andrew Wilson, David James Wilson, Sydney Wilson, Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Burns, James Curray-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gareth McLean and Richard Straw. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Well, the Ambassadors of Death could be really spoiling you by appearing in your podcast feed 6 months earlier than it does to mere mortals who get it from iTunes and Podbean and Spotify and those places, because at patreon.com/Toby Haydoke, Happy Times and Places is usually about 6 months ahead. Too Much Information, one of the other podcasts available there, is usually 1 or 2 episodes ahead, and Indefinable Magic is also an episode or 2 ahead, but certainly at least a month in advance of release, sometimes much more. There's also Far Too Much Information, which is a completely exclusive to patrons podcast, and there are monthly AMAs, also patron exclusive, and other sort of little trinkets, including behind-the-scenes peeks at the various DVD documentaries and commentaries and things that I do, maybe bits of my stand-up as well, and other things that I think you might like. I've also done exclusive commentaries on episodes of Quatermass and Survivors and things like that, and stuff that hopefully justifies payment of, well, it starts as little as £3 a month and goes up to, whatever you like, because billions if you want. Nobody's paying that yet, so come and be the first. But no, everything is available at the lowest tier, which is £3 a month. And you can get a discount on that, and indeed on any of the tiers, if you sign up for a year in one go. You get 10% off. So I try and make it as fair as possible, and it's entirely voluntary. And, there's nothing in terms of the podcasts that doesn't eventually make it out. But there are patron exclusives, but there's nothing that takes you up the tiers that is really that important, the badge here or there and the odd other bits that actually nobody's ever really claimed, because the meat and drink, the podcasts are there, or all of the listening material and viewing material is there at the lowest tier, £3 per month. If you can't or don't want to have a monthly commitment, I totally get that. You can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Haydoke and throw a few pieces of silver into my profit hat and just pretend that you buy me a coffee any time that you like. That doesn't get you any exclusives, but it is a way of supporting this output. I'm grateful for that as well. I'm grateful, though, if you just listen. And there's nothing about just listening. There's so much out there. The fact that you have given an hour of your time listening to my waffle means I'm extremely grateful. But that means hopefully that you like what I'm doing. And if that's the case, if you could go to iTunes, Spotify, Podbean and give these a 5-star rating and a few lines of review, that really helps. I've stalled a bit on iTunes. I haven't had any reviews or ratings for a while. So if you haven't popped over and done that, I don't know if it's even called iTunes anymore. The Apple place. Go there and boost my 5 stars and boost my review content. That just really, really helps to, well, to separate these from the crowd and to get them noticed when people search or peruse the internet for Doctor Who related material. That costs you nothing from a bit of your time, which I'm grateful to you for spending in my company. So, thanks. You can also go on social media. These podcasts have their own feed at Hayhoe Podcasts on Twitter or Opal Fruits. I have my own feed as well, where I, plug my comedy nights and other things as well. So, don't go there if you're only after the Doctor Who. Well, no, do, because it's mostly Doctor Who there as well, which is at Toby Haydoke. I'm also at toby.haydoke on Instagram. I have my own Facebook page, and I have my own website, which has a blog and other various bits and bobs at tobyhaydoke.com. And you can subscribe to updates there as well. So, do all that internet stuff. Makes me feel wanted. And my comedy club, Excess Malarkey, which is every Tuesday in Manchester, has its own Twitter feed at Excess Malarkey, and it also has its own Facebook page as well. So if you could support that endeavour, I get really, really good comics there. I've just recently been speaking to one of the most famous comics in the country who's going to be doing a bit for me shortly. I mean, it'll be in the past if you're listening to this on iTunes or Opal Fruits. But nonetheless, good people pass through, and it's good fun. So that's Excess Malarkey Comedy Club. Been a bit troublesome, this one, in terms of technology. And then Mark, I can't remember what I saw Mark on, because I've just checked Instagram and it's not there. There's a chap called Mark Wright on there, but that's the husband of Michelle Keegan, who used to be in Coronation Street with my partner Shez. I went to her birthday party when I'd not been seeing Shez for very long. She was very lovely, very beautiful, but she left at around that time as well. So, God, that will be 10 years or so ago. But I think she's married to a Mark Wright, who's from an Essex or This Way is Chelsea or one of those. And he's on Instagram, and he's who I thought I was clicking on when I clicked on to see Mark. So it's not there, but it wasn't on Mark's Facebook either. But he was plugging, I think, a Big Finish that he's just written that's just come out and said, I'm not on Twitter now, so I'll do it here. So maybe he had done it on Facebook and I just didn't see it, but I just looked at his Facebook. Anyway, look for Mark. I'll have a go so that I can put him in the closing credits. But I just thought it was very funny that this is the most ambassadors of deathy thing to happen, that as I'm putting this out, having made sure that I plugged his Twitter feed, he then goes, I'm not on there anymore. So people listening to episodes 1 and 2 of this who aren't patrons, because I'm not going to re-record the closing credits. Again, I can kind of say, well, it's very appropriate for the mystique of the Ambassadors of Death that the closing credits of the Happy Times and Places for episodes 1 and 2 of the Ambassadors of Death will have an unconnected thread that never quite resolves itself, which adds to the feeling of dissonance, and that this is an outlier version of Happy Times and Places because it's concerned with the Ambassadors of Death, which is itself very difficult to quantify and qualify because it's weird and strange and somehow unknowable. I mean, I know human beings see patterns in things that aren't there, but of all the stories for that to happen in, ha ha ha. Anyway, hope you're enjoying it because I bloody love it.